Welcome to our panel with communications experts today. I am very excited for this. Y'all will learn a lot because communications is such a huge part of a nonprofit and their fundraising efforts and just getting a reputation and name out in the community. So we can dive right in, and I'll introduce our two guests for today. First is Paula Murphy. She does public relations with Patterson and Murphy, and Paula was just telling me how she does PR for a lot of restaurants in the Houston area, but also for the Houston Food Bank, which I know you are all familiar with. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And then we also have Frida Villalobos. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. She's the Director of Communications for Baker Ripley, formerly Neighborhood Centers, and has been there. How long have you been there?
Almost 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Almost 4 years.
Great. Well, now that the students kind of know where you are now, can you give them a rundown of 1 minute or less? What was your career track from college or grad school into your current position? How'd you get there?
I'll go first. Mine is very easy. This is my one and only job that I've ever had. I went to University of Houston main campus. I was a journalism major, and one of my aunts said, you know, you ought to do PR, and I thought, okay, that sounds like something. At that time, I looked through the yellow pages because the school was not helping place students that were not seniors, and I found this job. I went for the interview, and it's the only job that I've ever had. And everyone else has now moved or retired, and it's me.
And your name's
yeah. So at one point I became a partner with the founder, and then she retired. So she was the one that had a specialty in food and restaurants. She had been a food writer. So the agency has a food and hospitality specialty, and I began working with the food bank 16 years ago.
Wow.
So
fantastic.
Awesome. So I graduated with a Bachelor's of Mass Communications from Texas State University, now used to be Southwest Texas, with a focus in broadcast journalism, TV and radio. Then I went to work in Waco, Texas as a producer for about 6 months. After that, I moved back to Houston, worked for KHOU for a few years as an assistant producer in the morning show. After that, I worked for a Spanish station here in town doing programming and branding. Shortly after, about 2 years after that, I started working with the Houston Area Women's Center. Was there for 5 years, worked for Houston Community College, and then now I work for Baker Ripley. Not my only job. I've moved around, so started in TV and now in the nonprofit
That's
world.
Great. And so y'all both have experience in places outside of nonprofits. So is there any way that communication strategies are different for nonprofits, or are they not different?
You want to go first,
Yeah,
so I
you
don't
can go
start
ahead.
first every time? I think a lot of things can be applied to both, and yes, there are differences. I mean, your audience is different. Sometimes your message is different. I mean, dealing with what I do with marketing restaurants, that is quite a different thing than appealing to somebody for a nonprofit cause to get support, whether it's donations or volunteers and just general knowledge. So I think a lot of the things apply to both. I think you definitely can apply the things you do for other work to things for nonprofit. A well-written communication piece will go far no matter who you're trying to market, who you're trying to publicize, and you having worked in TV, you probably can speak to that from a media side. So I think that it can be a similar message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I think what I've learned here within my position is that any good strategic communications plan is going to have a lot of the same elements that could be used either for nonprofit or for corporations. You know, it's all going to be driven by your key audiences, your different channels, where you're trying to push out your message, and your main message. And I think having that in any communications plan could be key in terms of managing communications.
And in a lot of the students' readings right now, there is certainly a communications plan component. Is there, one piece of advice you would give to someone in a nonprofit when it comes to the communications plan, or one thing to really focus on, or something that may be the most important piece of a communications plan that you would say?
God, you know, you always have to take the 360 approach, because you can't just focus on one thing. You have to look at the bigger picture. I think figuring out who your target audiences are, it's extremely important. And also the channels that you're using. It can be media, it can be social media, online, anything across the board. So making sure that your plan is look on a higher level, in making sure that you understand your audiences, understand your channels, and understand your message.
Great advice.
I mean, for corporations, the buzzword has been and probably always will be branding, and you do need to brand for a nonprofit as well. So, your game plan for anything that you do, whether it's a corporation or a nonprofit, there should always be key elements that kind of are woven through everything that you do. Having a similar look, the same font or something like that. I mean, it can be a totally different plan for an aspect of something of your organization, but you want it to have the look and feel of your organization. What is it? It takes 5 times, I don't know, there's a number, 5 times for somebody to begin recognizing something. So that's why, we have different departments at the food bank, and they'll say, well, we want to be red. And it's like, red is not part of the color palette. We'll figure out a way to get it in there and make it look the same, but you don't want to disassociate yourself with that organization. You want to always show that there's a strong cohesion between the different departments, and that your message is the same, and that your main mission is going through every department of your organization or your business, if it's a business.
So do y'all have like branding guidelines where it talks about color palette and different kind of templates, I guess, to use?
Yes, we actually, because we went through a rename, we had to redo a lot from scratch. So our branding guidelines are probably very thorough compared to others. We included our key messaging in there, our new brand guide, brand elements, new graphics, the logo, and in terms of developing your key messages for either media or speeches, that's also included in there. So and for every organization it's different, but ideally some of the elements are, of course, you have to have your logo, how to use your logo, how to not use your logo, the fonts, when to use them, when not to use them, and especially a guide, because for us, because we're an agency that's so large, we have created templates for folks to be able to use, because we're not able to do everything for everyone. We're not able to design everything, but we do have tools for folks to be able to use, so that they're able to create their own flyers and push it out effectively and in a timely fashion.
That's great.
And it's branded the same across the board.
Okay, that makes sense. And y'all both mentioned social media as key strategies. What would you say is something really to keep in mind when any rules of thumb around social media outreach?
I am not in charge of the social media for the food bank. I had been. Now we do have a staff member, but I assist with that. I think the main thing that we try to keep in mind is everybody of all ages use social media, but it is still an audience, I would say, that it kind of skews to younger, depending on which channel you're using. And I think it's keeping the message quick and light. I mean, it can be about a serious topic, but easily understandable, easily digestible, and if you need to link to something, I just think it's a way to get out messages in a quick manner, which I'm sure we'll get to that, and I know the same for you. In times of disaster like Harvey, it was key to be pushing these messages out, and a lot of people lost their phones, but most people did have phones over television. So it was easy to say, if you need food, you can go here. If you need to volunteer. So I think it's a great way to communicate with people on a very personal, conversational level, and get things out quickly. I mean, it's key. I think it's just...
Oh yeah, like I would say definitely invest in having a social media strategy of some sort, because it's a great tool and it's easy access to different types of audiences. I think I used to hear social media is free. Well, no, there isn't, because typically right now a a lot of teams, communication marketing teams, will have a person dedicated to doing social media. We have one person who does all of our social media. For us, it's an excellent way to engage with folks, you know, in a different way. We engage our volunteers, we engage our community members, we engage many different audiences, and we have messages that cater to the different audiences. So definitely great for students, I think, especially social media. Get familiar with it, take courses if you can within your coursework, and learn it, understand it, and include it in your resume, because just having words like social media, understanding it, and keeping up to date, because social media is it changes all the time. So, you know, keep up to date and trending topics. What are the most, what are those pages that are being used? What are the tools? I think it's important and will give you a great advantage when you're looking for a job.
Yeah, that's great. And, you know, both of y'all are affiliated with very large nonprofits, two of the largest in Texas, probably. And Children at Risk, for example, to give students a picture of what it looks like when you're not so large, we have, you know, maybe 20 staff members. So it's kind of, you know, it's on the larger side, but it's definitely not as big. But we don't have a dedicated social media person, and our communications person is a PR who really just handles media. And so it's on the responsibility of staff members to help write press releases, help write op-eds, to do the social media, to take pictures at events and stuff like that. So for students, whenever y'all are just getting into nonprofits, you may not have the luxury of having someone there. So having those skills yourself will make you valuable.
Definitely.
Definitely. And at the food bank, we have, right as I'm about to say it, the name is slipping my mind, but we have basically, it's like a social media council. It found that there are people who are really following the messages of food bank, participating a lot, and we could see they were Facebooking a lot or tweeting a lot, and so they have been asked to kind of be on a committee to help drive certain messages. And they're totally volunteers. They're community people who just love the cause and want to help Houston. And you know, that is something, you know, your followers and your donors and you know, your volunteers can really be a resource for you, but you can't just turn them loose and let them do whatever they want to do. That's where the branding comes in, the messaging, the packet. These are the things we want to say, you know, and I think that's ideal. You just need to find people who really, you know, want to help the cause and will stay that way.
Yeah,
so.
we also have a group of ambassadors that we work with
Ambassadors,
internally.
thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that idea back to Dr. Bob. So for when you are trying to get a message out there, how do you choose, you know, what messages are better for social media, what are better for mail pieces, and what are better for having a press conference and getting something on the TV or radio?
That's a big question.
Oof. I think it just really depends on your ultimate goal and what your audience is, you know, because again, you want to be consistent in the messaging across the board, whichever channel it is that you're using. But, you know, for press conferences, for example, you may be having a press conference because you're launching a new program or you're launching a new initiative, a new campaign, and you always want to connect it back to the bigger picture in terms of the agency. For example, our agency, we always talk about how we help people earn, learn, and belong, you know. So that's a message that we typically use all the time in everything that we do. So when we have events, when we have speakers, they know that that's something that if they're going to speak on a topic, they're going to use that across the board. So it just really depends. I think that you can have overarching messages for the agency or the organization that you're working for, and then somehow find a way to connect it back to whatever it is that you're doing, whether it is, you know, social media, press conferences, or whatever it is.
And I would say all three of our organizations are doing multiple things at once all the time. You have a donor that may be giving you a large donation and you want to give them some credit and thank them fully for that. You may have a new program or something that's launching and you know that you're going to want media for that. You know, something, a study may have come out in the news that you also need to address that. And sometimes all of those things can happen at the same time. And that's when you really have to think about the question that you're asking. It's like, which channel would be best for what? Because you can't, and you worked in TV, so you know, I mean, if I'm the food bank and I send you 5 press releases in one day, you're gonna be like, really? I mean, we got a lot of stuff to cover here. So you really wanna just think like, you know,
strategically.
Yeah, what's gonna be the best for this? Now, you know, it really makes sense, a check presentation. Why don't we, you know, maybe tweet the photo out, put it on Facebook, and then we'll send it out to the media for like post-event coverage. But if we're announcing our new program, this is something we wanna have a press conference for and try to get people to come and do live coverage, and then maybe it'll become another story. So sometimes I think you have to think about it in that way. Most things will be appropriate for every channel, but you can't always do every channel all at once, and you don't want to exhaust your message or the media that you're trying to communicate with. And I think that's a huge thing you got to think about.
Yeah, figure out your goal, your end goal, and figure out which message works for the channel that you're using.
And in terms of press conferences, you know, that's something that Dr. Sanborn has done for decades. Like, he loves a good press conference. But it seems that so few nonprofits really utilize the, you know, regular TV and radio that way. And it's a free way to harness attention and get your message out there. Why would you say that so few nonprofits actually think about doing that or pursue it?
I think press conferences can be a little overwhelming for people, because you know you're going to gather all these people and and what if one camera shows up? Then you feel like, oh, we didn't do a good job, we didn't get our message out. I mean, I think that's one small component of it. I don't know, maybe timing. You know, sometimes I go, our event's at 4:00. Well, that doesn't really fit with such and such channel. They don't have news then. I don't know. I mean, those are two things that I think, but they can be effective, but you really got to have a good message. I mean, obviously you're not going to be like, hey, we put in new pavers at the front door, you know, y'all come. I think you just really have to have a good message. I don't know.
For me personally, I'm not a big fan of press conferences, especially because, you know, the media, for example, they're always looking for a different way of telling a story. And if I'm a journalist, I'm not necessarily going to want to always go to the same press conference everybody's going to go to. So
and get the same angle,
exactly.
the same quote and all that.
So unless it's a major thing that's happening and that you want to be also there. But I think another way to be able to do that strategically is do more of the proactive pitching on one-on-one basis with folks that you know may have the beat or cover whatever it is that you're doing on a daily basis. So that's something that's been very effective for us. Is yes, we're gonna have an event, it's gonna have a press component, but we do the individualized pitching where you are reaching out to that one business reporter that is gonna be interested in this new program that is gonna put people back to work. And you work with that one reporter or 2 reporters who are going to work on a story previewing this event, so that when you have this event, there's something already out, and that you've spent some time rather than just a one-off. You have a very well put together package, article, whatever it is that you're doing, and that is, if as a donor or someone that's sponsoring this event, that is a far more valuable than having maybe just a voiceover or like a small mention on an article. So there's different ways of doing it.
Now, Dr. Sanborn worked with the food bank and many other organizations to do a press conference around Harvey right after, and that is also a way that people could think about it. If you don't have a big staff and you don't think my single message may not be big enough, but if it's something where things are dovetailing, I think that day we had 6, 7 different nonprofit organizations. Everyone got up to the podium to speak, and then the media that was there was able to go off, and theirs might have been, hey, we're concerned with children. Hey, we're concerned with where people are going to get food. And so that worked out really well, because you got a key message to find out, and then each reporter could go specialize and focus their topic. So that's something possible too. I think nonprofits really do want to help each other, and I think it's a good thing to do.
And that sends a big message, especially for example, we had one around immigration, where we invited a host of nonprofits, and it's not. The goal was not to get a lot of media there. The goal was to send a message that here we are. This is a big group that is in support of this one thing, right? So I think those are ways that when a press conference can be very effective.
Great, great. And so far in our discussion, we haven't really talked about raising money, but how would you say that, you know, your communication strategies really help raise money for the organization?
You can't do it without it. You know, I think that, you know, we at Baker Ripley, we work in partnership with our development team day in and day out. You know, we have big events that we do as teams throughout the year, and one has to support the other. Because, you know, we're pushing out the messages that, you know, that eventually are going to draw people in to either, you know, volunteer or support in one way or another. You can do one without the other.
You know, and I think most nonprofits do some sort of a mailer program, or they have their major corporate donors and this and that. But, you know, the food bank's tagline is filling pantries, filling lives. And these are things that we talk about. And I think in one way, lives is the key part to that. So you're going to have your hard message of here's our annual campaign or whatever. But the other part of it is you need to know where that money is going. And when people know, you know, that what Neighborhood Centers does, or Children at Risk does, or the food bank does, you want to pitch those stories so people understand I'm giving to a cause. I see my money in action in the community. And that's where, you know, the stories about, you know, a new food pantry opening and volunteers being out on the streets, you know, or not literally the streets, but, you know, on the ground doing volunteer work to help feed people, or, you know, the shelter downtown. Those things are key. So, I mean, you are sending messages all the time about fundraising for a nonprofit when you send out any press release about that nonprofit, because if they don't know what the money is going for, they're not going to give you money.
And that kind of goes back to your point about like hearing a name or whatever it is 5 times before you even start to think about becoming involved. That's great. We have a question from one of our students, Rocio Moreno, and he asks whether y'all communicate in multiple languages in your mail pieces and in any of your outreach materials.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the food bank does, but mainly just English and Spanish. You know, we probably should be better and add Vietnamese and some other things on there, but yes, we do.
That's great.
Yeah.
For us, for fundraising, it's primarily in English. Now, when we are communicating directly with the folks that we serve, we do it in several different languages.
Okay, that's wonderful. And this is one question from a student, Jocelyn. How do you find your donors? It seems like a very basic question, and you know, it's kind of maybe sometimes you tap out all your donors or the major ones anyway. Do y'all have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So you have your established donors, right? But you also have different ways where you're trying to garner new folks. So we do that through different ways. Right now, we're working on a new campaign that is going to be directed towards getting new people involved. So we're doing a campaign around just our work and our impact, but it's going to be towards people that are maybe don't know about us. So anytime that we have opportunities to go to events or to talk to folks that may not know about us, for us it's a good opportunity, because even though Neighborhood Centers Baker Ripley has been in the Houston area for 110 years, I run across people all the time that don't know the agency. So for us, you know, social media is a good way to find new people. You know, we have events throughout the year. We attend and we collaborate with different partners. We do mail outs. This new campaign, we're working with this agency where we're going to be getting a list of potential folks that may like us. We do also advertising on social media where we can target specific areas and specific demographics. So there's different ways where you can find potential donors. Really, anyone that you can talk to can be someone that can give you, $5.
Yeah, everybody you meet is a potential donor, and literally $5 can go a long way for a lot of organizations. but compound that by just 10 people, yeah. So, I mean, I think the food bank is always looking for donors, and they're looking for them in different places. I mean, whether it's a corporate event that they attend, the Houston Marathon, they have a marathon team, the people that run for them. So you might not think, oh, a marathoner really cares about hunger, but they do. I mean, so a lot of these large events like that have causes that you can get involved with. Young professionals who are in business and they want to see it kind of as a networking opportunity,
Right.
but then there's the cause component to it. So really it's just looking around your community, and hopefully your donors are a representation of the diversity of your organization and the people that you serve. So really it can be unlimited. I mean,
Right.
if you really are in tune with what your organization is doing and who you're serving, and anybody is a potential donor.
Yeah, that is a great way to look at it, especially in nonprofit where you need donors to
Yeah.
keep on going.
I mean, and it's tough out there right now, as everybody knows. I mean, but I think overall, especially in Houston, people do want to help. I think there's probably not a more caring city, and so that part is good. But you do want to be careful to not tap out, your people and ask too often, and just being grateful for the support that you do get makes a big difference. You will
Right.
always keep a donor or get another donor by being appreciative of the money that you do
Exactly.
get. So that's key, I
Yeah.
would say.
That's great. And Frida, you mentioned impact. Do y'all really push the development team or the program staff to give you some numbers that you can put out there, that because people want
Yeah.
to know what impact are you making nowadays? It's making you think as a nonprofit like 3 steps forward into or ahead into what did I actually do, but how did it help people?
Yeah, we actually have a team that is dedicated solely at collecting data and making sense of it. So anytime we're asking for numbers, that's the team that we go to, because that's the numbers that we're using across the board. So definitely, I think that's a great way to paint the picture and to let people know that this is what we do, and this is why we do it, and these are the numbers. So in our annual report, we talk about the impact across the board. Neighborhood centers is not your traditional nonprofits where we're doing just one thing, and that I think sometimes makes it difficult to describe, because we have Baker Ripley has immigration programs, we have education programs, we have small business programs, but one thing that they all have in common is connecting people to opportunity, whatever that may be, through learning, through earning, and through belonging, whatever, in the community. So impact is key when we're talking about our work. Yeah.
I think anytime you can distill it down to a message that people can really get, $1 will do X, or
Right.
infographics are so huge and can tell a lot in one little snapshot. I think infographics are a big thing.
Right.
I'm sure you guys use them a lot. I know the food bank does.
Yeah.
You want to see the impact of, your $1 can provide 3 meals. And then, you build from that. But I think infographics are a big thing to do.
That's great. Yeah, we use them all the time. How would you say that a student could get a job in nonprofit communications? I mean, we have students who may already be in nonprofits, just doing something different because this is a master's degree management program. We have other students who are straight out of undergrad, and other students who are in a whole nother career altogether, wanting to come back to something more meaningful.
I think, and I had this conversation with a student recently, is narrowing down, those key topics or those causes that you're really passionate about, finding those agencies or those nonprofits that do support those causes. I think a very easy way to start to get involved is simply by volunteering, and learning more about the agency, learning the work, and being noticed. One of the things that I told one of the students was, if you're interested in getting involved with an organization, ask their communications team, what they need, check what they're doing online, ask them, hey, can I do a video for you, or can I create content for you? Because especially for smaller nonprofits, they're always looking for opportunities to create more content. They may not have the capacity. So volunteering some way or interning some way, I think, is a great way to start. I started at the Women's Center. I was there for 5 years as a volunteer in the hotline. So I took the training, I became a hotline advocate, and then a position opened up. And because they knew that I had background in communications, I was able to land, the job for communications at that time. So it's a good way, just get involved, just narrow. I think it's important though to do your research, narrow down your focus on where you want to go, and then get involved with that agency. Yeah.
That's great advice.
Ditto.
And are there any skills that you think that you would be looking for in someone that you were to hire to help with communications for nonprofits?
Social media is a big one, and to know how to write a good message in the concise manner, whether that is for social media, but also in crafting, a media advisory as opposed to a press release. I think that's key. Being able to take photos is big for other people, and just having networking capabilities, being able to speak well, knowing the cause of the organization, and understanding how to communicate that to different entities, whether it's a donor, a volunteer, any number of communities. But I think if you want to be in a communications department, just know how to communicate and just be really, really good at it, and in a variety of ways, and know the cause. And I've known people who've worked for nonprofits, but they just took the job because they wanted a job in nonprofit, but that wasn't something they were passionate about. And I think when you have the passion behind the skills, that's when you're really going to go far, and you're going to make a difference for yourself, and you're going to make a difference for the organization. So like you said, really do your research, find what you like to do, and I think that's the best way to do it, is start there. Be passionate.
Yeah, I think strong writing skills is important. Make sure that you are good writer, and that you have just creative ideas. And for any person in communications, always think multimedia. If you can do video, that's awesome. If you can take photos, if you can edit photos, if you can create graphics, if you can find creative ways to push out content that is different from what maybe that agency is doing, I think it's important. So learn how to shoot video, learn how to edit video, learn how to take a good photo, learn how to create a simple graphic, because that's something that you can put on your resume. It's something that you can have and build a portfolio with, and you can take with you, and it can really make a difference.
That's very true. So students, if any of y'all out there are good at video or taking photos, Children at Risk needs you to donate some of that to us. But both of y'all mentioned writing skills, and that's something that I really push the students on. They will be tired of me by the end of the semester talking about punctuation and grammar and everything.
Drives me insane. I'm the one that sees a meme or meme, however you say it, on and it has the wrong punctuation, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to edit this so badly.
Right?
I can't stand it.
And my background is in journalism too, and so that might be also
Maybe
why,
that's
that
why
training. But do you see, when you think of your even personal, professional communication with other CEOs of nonprofits or people at the director level of different departments, are their writing skills there?
I think for the most part, everybody has a different way of communicating. I think that there's a big difference when you're talking to someone in communications and marketing versus someone that is maybe like a program-based individual. But I think really anyone should have really good writing skills and good etiquette, email, personal, professional, because that goes a long way, and that creates an impression. So I think anyone can really benefit in just being a good writer.
And I completely agree with that, from what I just said, but sometimes I think it's interesting to at least let somebody give you their version of how they might say something, because they might word it in a way that you wouldn't have thought to do it, and we might think about it as, a journalism way to do it, and sometimes somebody might just say it in a little more conversational way. You may have to zhuzh it at the end and make it right, but I do think, some people are a tad more what is it, casual, and you don't want it to be too casual, but there is a balance between being so journalistic about it and having a nice casual way of saying it. So at least I think it's nice to let people at least, give it their effort, and then you go through it and you say, you know what, this is what I really love about what you wrote. You got the key message, but let's try this, and they will feel appreciated, and they will probably do more.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we have to do within our department is, we just got a new CEO for our agency, so learning that person's voice is important, because the way that we used to write for the previous person is going to be very different from the way that we're going to write for for the new person. So if you have experts that you typically use or that you have to write for, learn their voice, learn their tone, because you're gonna, if you're having to write talking points, if you're having to write speeches for someone, you have to learn that person's voice to make sure that it caters to their voice and it makes them sound like themselves, not like someone wrote that for them. So learning the voice of whoever that you're writing for, I think, is important too.
And y'all both made great points around that. I mean, you can write very straightforward, you can use simple language, it can sound casual and easy to understand, and you could add a little flair in there, but still at the end of the day, it has to be, proper grammar and spelling and punctuation.
For sure.
Yeah, so that's why we are sticklers for that. What would y'all say, just personally, what's the most rewarding part of your jobs?
For the work that I do for the food bank, the most rewarding thing, and I even get teary-eyed just thinking about it, is just knowing that you provided a meal to somebody who might not have had it. And I've gone out on food fairs, I've gone out during the hurricane for things, and when you see somebody and you put a bag of produce in their hand, especially a little kid, and they start crying, it's like, this is why you do what you do. In the nonprofit world, you may not get paid a lot of money, but there's big rewards at the end of it. So I think to be able to see the mission of an organization in motion, that will do it. And that will do it for an employee, it will do it for a donor, it will do it for a volunteer. I mean, that's the key thing. You have to somehow, within whatever experience somebody has with your organization, you have to provide them some kind of a glimpse of what purpose they are serving. So when you leave the food bank, if you just volunteered for 12 hours, you're gonna walk out and they're gonna put a sign in front of you and say, we worked 12 hours, we provided, I'm making up a number, 20,000 meals. And then you're like, wow, then you can leave there and say, look what I just did. And I know you all have done things that are similar to that, but that's when you've got them with your mission. And that's it. And I'm sorry I got teary-eyed, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Same here. I think just seeing the impact and for me is hearing the stories and of success or those stories that don't necessarily have like the happy ending, but they will continue on. Thanks to the programs that we have at Baker Ripley. It's the impact and seeing how our work, whatever it is that we're doing, is actually making a difference in what we do, not only to that individual, but to a family or to really the Houston region.
That's great. And what would you say maybe is the most difficult part of your job?
I think for us, coming, working for an agency that is ever changing, is just trying to keep up. We went through a rename. Our CEO retired. Now we have a new CEO. Is a lot of things happen in a very short period of time, and it's just keeping up. I think because there's so much to do and so little time to do it. I think sometimes it's difficult. It keeps things exciting for sure. You can't get bored, but because we're an organization that it's always responding to whatever it is happening. We responded when Harvey happened. We had to make a lot of shifts when that happened, and And it's just having to respond, having to transition, and having to adjust and be flexible. I think can sometimes get hard, but it's also exciting. That's one of the things that I also really enjoy about the job, but it's like, oh my God, something else happened. So that's probably mine.
Yeah.
I would say mine is, because of course, you always think everything about your organization is newsworthy and notable and great, and it's not tiring out the messaging. Like, am I pushing too many things out at once? Am I going to fatigue the media that I am trying to help communicate my message of my organization? So I think sometimes, that gets a little tenuous because you have donors you want to keep happy, and they may not understand that they just gave a check for X amount and they want a photo, but it's like, but I just sent out 3 releases about disaster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So sometimes I think that's the hardest thing, is just making sure everybody in each department, the development department might be like, where's my, such and such on this donor, and it's like, well, we're gonna have to hold off on that, so I think that's the hardest part. It can be a juggling act, but luckily, usually all the little pieces end up coming together and you find a place for everything. But you don't want to wear your media out, because you are so indebted to them and so grateful to them, and I'd say that is the hardest part.
And same thing with your donors. You don't want to wear them out with one newsletter after the other, or anything like that.
For sure.
Good. Well, let's turn to some other questions from the students. Caroline Sharpless asks, what are the most effective communications channels for nonprofits in your experience? You mentioned social media a lot, but...
social media definitely is one. Media relations is another. Your website should always be a good channel as well.
And that's something, the Neighborhood Center's website like 3 years ago was really hard.
Yeah.
And now it's just beautiful, and I love it.
Completely different. If I could pick 3, those would be the 3. I think social media, media relations, and online presence is important.
I'd say those 3. The only other one, the other main one I can think of is direct mail, and a lot of people do still do that, but that's can be costly for some organizations. So they may need to do that more on their website. But those are the top 3. I would say.
That's great. I actually had one other question I wanted to get to before going to the rest of the students, but. So a lot of times when foundations give money, they're not including funding for communications staff. So their communications are typically taken or funded by unrestricted dollars, which are hard to come by. They're very hard to get, right? Can nonprofits afford not to have a communications staff?
Staff might be the tough word. You need to have a communications leader
someone.
or whatever. Whether it's within your organization or someone outside of it. Really.
Yeah, I think that it could be a mistake not investing. I think you have to look at it as an investment that supports everything that you do, and I think your communications team or person can be key in making you successful. I think it's something that sometimes gets cut and it's not taken in consideration, but it's important because they're driving your message and eventually driving donations back to your agency. So when I worked at the Women's Center, it was a staff of 2. It was me and another person, and it was small, but we did everything, and I understand you don't have to have a big team, but at least have someone or a few folks that are dedicated to that area. I think is huge, and it's key.
There's so many more places where you have to have written messages. 10, 15, 20 years ago, you didn't have a website. You didn't have social media channels. You didn't have to worry about that. If you got somebody that was really good in your development department that knew how to write just a rockin' donation letter, you could maybe pull from that for other things. But now they're just the written word. There are just too many opportunities and places to put out messages that you got to have somebody that's doing that. It's everything is so important. You don't want to, like you said, that usually gets cut, and obviously you have to have development, but You
It's
you
an
can't cut that.
investment. You have to look at it an investment. It's a huge investment that you have to make.
For sure. And we have a couple of questions on here about donors. What would you say, giving advice to maybe one of our or a few of our students who work at nonprofits or starting nonprofits, to what kind of strategies would you use for reaching out to your donors for the first time?
I think for the first time is getting connect them to your message. You know, I think storytelling is key in whatever form that you're going to use, whether it is, you know, a written piece or a video piece or something that is a graphic. I think finding way to pull them in, telling a story of someone that you've impacted and how they can help you continue making that impact. I think storytelling is important to getting people to pay attention to you and having a call to action in everything that you do, and giving them something to do. We were having a team meeting today, and our team shared a really awesome video that it was a non-traditional way of asking people to get involved and to donate. It asked people, you know, what can you do? What are you good at? You tell us how do you want to support our cause, and that leaves the door open to someone saying, oh my gosh, well, the only thing that I can do is donate, or the only thing that I can do is volunteer. So it's a very interesting way of engaging or having a call to action at the end of the video. So you can do it through storytelling, but you have to hook them in from that beginning.
I also think it's important to do a little bit of research and do your work before you go to a company or a foundation or anybody, even just an individual. I mean, you might see Jim Brown over here, he's really big into cancer causes. So if that's your nonprofit, you want to go there, but you may not want to go to him for your local theater organization. I mean, they may help, but really looking at that and paying attention in the media, you'll see Jim Brown is at the such and such gala and this and that, then you know, okay, he's into social causes or he's into art. So pay attention to those things, and really you can start building your own little, you know, database of, I think I'm going to reach out to these people. Doing that is really important, because you don't want to waste your time sending it to somebody who really doesn't have an interest in those causes. So you might as well streamline it and know your audience. Just like with the media, know your audience. For your donors, know your audience.
And have your focus message,
Yeah.
like
Right.
Villalobos talking about. Milton asks, how do you measure the success of a good marketing strategy?
I wish it was just by hours of work you put into it. That would be fabulous. I mean, you can measure it by donations. You can, on all your social media channels, you can see impressions. You can see your media reports, how many features came out. But I guess in the end, if you do something and it can become viral, well, then that's fabulous. But
yeah, and again, it depends on your goal. So what is your end goal? So, you know, if your goal is to have 5 media hits a month, then that is a great measure of success, you know. But if your goal at the end of the day is to have a number of donations, that's a way to measure it. So it just really depends on what your goal is for whatever it is that you're doing. But you can measure in, you know, like she said, impressions. You can measure by numbers or simply by impact.
by volunteers.
Exactly.
And there are a lot of, I didn't know, even on Twitter or Facebook, people who know it better than me can figure out like how to measure things like impressions. I'm not really even sure what that is.
Yeah, our person who manages all of our social media, she basically does all the analytics. And every month she comes in and she, like, you know, if we send out a newsletter, she comes in and reports, okay, this is how many people opened the newsletter. What does this mean, you know? So she goes in and brings the stats and we talk about what's working, you know? Because every month for our newsletter, we change the subject lines. We use different things. So we're testing out every month what's working and what drew more people to open the email rather than not. So it's important to see what's working so that you know what are those good things that you're doing, so you keep doing the same thing.
And it is nice when you can have somebody do that. But like you're saying, some of these people might be getting started. They don't have a lot of money. There are ways to do it. I'm not saying I'm an expert in it, but even if you use Hootsuite, there is an insights portion of that. So that's the way you can start
Google
doing it
as
yourself.
well.
Yeah, and Google Analytics. And then, when you get to the point, if you can have somebody that can help you do that. But there are small ways that you yourself, if you're not an expert, can start to see if you're making an impact or an
Exactly.
impression.
And you mentioned just now Google Analytics, and that's something that also can be free. Google does a lot of, small grants, so like $1,000 here or there, but it actually covers a lot where you can add coding to different links on your website and see how many people are visiting all the different pages of your website.
Exactly.
And then MailChimp is another one for mailing out.
That's exactly what we use for newsletters.
And it's
Yeah.
great, right? Because you can see who opened it, who forwarded it, and how many
long
times.
it took them to open it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy what they can tell you.
Yeah.
It's a little
Yeah.
scary,
Yeah.
honestly. Another question we have here is, when should a nonprofit seek the help of an outside PR or ad agency?
God, that's driven by budget.
Yeah.
I think it just really depends on what you have to play with. And also, I think there are times where, there might be a crisis that you may not be able to handle. You need an outside perspective. That may be a good time to involve someone that has a team and that can do it. So it really depends on what you have to, how much money you have to play with, but also the situation. We have partners that we work with because I'm just one person who's doing media relations, so I can't do it all. So at times we do work with partners who are supporting us through media outreach, but again, it depends on on your budget. At the Women's Center, it was just me, doing everything, and we had absolutely no budget to do anything, so there was no room for that. It just really depends because it can be costly to bring an outside agency in, and a lot of the time, you have to go through discovery sessions to make sure that whoever you bring in understands really what you do, they understand your message, and they can be an effective partner for you.
And I think if you're gonna go down that path of getting somebody to go to the expense of paying somebody to do it and all that, you really kind of, as a team, as an organization, you need to be ready for that. Because you might put all your money behind this big thing, this big whatever your promotion is, and if the development department is not ready to process things, or if you're a organization that depends on volunteers and your volunteer services department is not ready and they don't have their paperwork, and you kind of have to have your ducks in a row and be ready, because hopefully you're going to knock it out of the park, and God forbid you do this incredible branding or whatever it is and you're not ready for it. Then you've blown the budget on something that you were not ready to embrace. So I think you need to really look at what you have to market. Do you have the money to market? What is your big message you want to get out, and are we ready to be successful? I mean, you want to go into it thinking that it's going to be a success. So
yeah, and what it is that you need. Do you need help executing? Do you need more of the consulting voice? Figuring out, if you have a team, what can you do in-house, and what it is that your team inside needs the most help with. A lot of the time, within our team, we need help executing. It's just doing the work, because most of the time, a lot of the ideas can really be born inside, and we just need help people actually getting things done. So it just really depends on the situation.
Great advice. Wonderful. Well, I have a couple of fun questions here. If you were to write a book on nonprofit communications, what would be one or two chapters?
oh my God.
Ay.
What would be my chapters?
One of mine would be the art of media pitching, because I think there's an art to it, and you have to be very strategic about it. There would be a chapter on the stories that drive your mission, because I think that in order to have an effective communications plan, or you have to have your stories to be able to support anything that you do. I don't know, strategic planning with purpose maybe. Make sure that you have a plan in place and follow through it. Not just have a plan, but actually do what is in the plan. those are just a few.
I think one of mine would probably be think outside the box, because you can find donors or volunteers or whatever sometimes in unusual places, and it might be someone just following you on Twitter. You may post some picture that somebody then retweets and you don't even know who it is, and they don't really care what your nonprofit is, but they were so impressed by that one thing. Just taking a different look at what your nonprofit does and how it might impact maybe a person or a segment of the community that you may not think is the obvious choice. So I would say think outside the box for pitches to the media, for fundraising, for events for your volunteers. I would say that. And then one would have to be, going back to our journalism, is keep it simple, stupid. Because sometimes we get wrapped up, we think it has to be more complicated than it really has to be. And sometimes the simplest message really is the best. And there are people hired to write things and rewrite things and brand and this and that. And at the heart of it, you just distill it down. This is the message. This is what we're trying to accomplish. Now, how do we do that? And then that's when you think outside the box and, like you said, make the plan. And so
keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Right.
And punctuate properly.
Yeah, seriously.
Please.
That's great. And then what, I guess last question of the night, what is your favorite best kept secret in Houston? Whether it's a restaurant or a place to go or a park or something.
Gosh.
Yeah, when you sent that, I was like, wow, I better think of something great. But,
it's one of Bob's favorite questions. You can also just go with what's your favorite restaurant. That's also one of his favorite
I can't answer that.
because of your
I do PR for
conflicts.
restaurant. No.
I'm going to say El Bolillo Bakery is a great place to go and get really fresh pastries. And it's in my neighborhood.
Where is that?
It's off of Airline. Well, they have actually several locations, but they went viral when they created the unicorn cake and conchas and everything unicorn. So they have a very savvy social media person who anytime there's anything, they push out stuff on their social media, which is awesome. So El Bolillo Bakery is a good place to visit if you want sweets.
Well, I wasn't going to go food, but I love Tacos Tierras Calientes taco truck that is right around the corner from my house. And it's just a family. I think it's like a husband and wife. If you know where the West Alabama Ice House is, which is one of my other, it's not that hidden favorites, but it's parked across the street from there. And tacos are great, and it's dangerous living around the corner because you smell the delicious tacos
now I have to
cooking
go.
all the time. But I love that. And you get your tacos, you can go sit at the West Alabama Ice House, and every person in Houston, every age, ethnicity, whatever, is there at the Ice House. So that's a fun place to hang out.
Those are great suggestions.
It's almost time for dinner, so this is
I
good.
know, I'm like hungry now.
It's making me hungry. Good. Well, thank y'all so much for being here
Thank you for
today. I think the students learned a lot from
Great questions, by the way.
everything. Good. Well, I hope that y'all have a wonderful night, and the students, we'll see you next time.